and this could be unique to every individual. Do you find that the athlete is usually tougher on themselves than the parents are, or vice versa? Do you even friends or coaches? Is it really vary athlete to athlete on if they're more tough on themselves than not?
Okay, so that's a deep one, but I'll give you a
Yeah,
brief. I'll give you a brief outline of that. The
yeah.
athlete I break down into two types of athletes. The
Okay.
the self-motivated athlete, the number is typically um, more accurate. The athlete that needs push to be pushed by the parent is more of a pleaser or doing it for their parents, or the parents are living through the athlete, their son or daughter, and
Mm,
those numbers are artificially higher, I've seen, because they more report what they think their coach or parent wants, not what it really is. And you have
mm.
to get to really where it is where the growth begins, because if you're not where you are, then you're never going to get where you need to be.
All right. So, as you know, I was just in Dallas. Just got back from the PPA Texas Open, which was great. Great event. It was at Oasis Pickleball Club. The weather was tough, super, super tough. It poured a couple of the days, so much so that the parking lot actually flooded and cars were stuck sliding all over the place at the end of it. So it was a little bit hectic, but it was a super cool event. So what ended up happening was um, they had to compress pretty much all of the singles matches. So we were there watching on singles day into 8 courts underneath like an aluminum roof. So what was great was that so many pros were packed into one place that I was standing on the courts in the middle of the games watching, like so close to Ben Johns, I could smell the backside of him, like that close to the game, um, which is really really cool. But going through that process, played in the qualifier, lost in the qualifier, something that we just did, which I really wanted to go over, is how we process playing afterwards. Like we have preparation, right? We have the actual event itself. What is the new knowledge that we gain? What is the reflection that we do? And the reason that I wanted to get into that is because previously we talked about Eagles, right? And we talked about really the preparation beforehand. We talked about really controlling the controllables, what is really in our control, and defining that through Eagles. But then it's how do we utilize that afterwards to actually reflect on what we just did? So, really, what
Yeah.
I wanted to give you a floor for is how we walk through Eagles and really use the 3-2-1 method to then reflect and identify, okay, here's exactly what we did, and here's what needs to be worked on for next time.
Yeah. I love that. And weather is an uncontrollable. But
One00%.
what is controllable about the conditions is your reaction to the conditions. You can't have a non-reaction to a condition and be oblivious. Accepting an uncontrollable and being oblivious to your uncontrollables are two different things. Exceptional athletes accept the uncontrollable but do something about it. So there's always something you can do about it. So that's just a quick tidbit there. And the other, before we jump into grading the Eagles F on a 3-2-1
Yeah.
scale, is is the draw. Because I just heard this recently. I had a bad draw, and how many times have you heard that, said it, or thought it? A lot
Oh,
or
yeah.
little?
So a lot. So for
A
example,
lot.
we played a team. Yeah, we played a team that we thought was highly skilled, and we were like, tough draw in the first round, right?
Tough draw. Tough
Yeah.
draw. So uh, I've just recently come up with an epiphany on that. There is no
Okay.
such thing as a bad draw. There is only more learning and a better experience.
Okay, I love that.
There's only such thing as more learning and a better experience.
Okay.
Because when you have a tough draw or a bad draw, there's no such thing as a bad draw or a good draw. It is what it is. It's not in your control. But if you're playing Ben and Colin Johns, your experience is going to be extraordinary, win or lose. Your
Hmm.
learning is going to be a ton, win or lose. So that's why I don't think there's such a thing as a bad draw. Anyways,
I
back
actually
to
yeah.
yeah.
No,
So I
so
don't
what I
know,
was
man.
no,
Yeah,
for my half of things to kind of validate the exact point that you're getting on is when I've looked at draws, I've kind of hoped that I've gotten, and I think this is for other reasons too that we'll touch on. I've kind of hoped that I've gotten like one of the top ranked guys in the qualifier for like two reasons. One,
yeah,
I get to see a lot of things that I normally don't see on the other side of the court. Meaning it's different watching film. It's different even watching it in person, but actually playing against it is a whole nother element, right? So being able to play against that top tier talent, like you said, validates the amount that you're actually going to learn because you're seeing it. You're seeing things that you haven't seen before. And I do
yes,
think the second piece of that that I will admit is you get to play a whole lot freely because you're the underdog, right?
yeah,
So I think that's kind of a second piece to that. Either way, I just wanted to validate for you that learning is such a huge element that I actually hope in the qualifiers that I get one of the top seeds just so that I can see exactly what they're doing in real time. In real time.
yeah. Totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. So going to Eagles F. So I came up with the Eagles F because, and I have to credit the F part to my daughter Maddie because she realized that freely playing free, and the definition
Mm,
of that, or at least my definition of that, is playing without the attachment that you might miss. Playing without the attachment of the
mm,
ramifications of a negative outcome is playing freely. Play freely just to play freely, as if every ball is in. That is playing freely. Didn't fall under Eagles, but I had to include it. So we can go in more detail later, but
yeah.
the E for effort, what an athlete should do is have a spreadsheet, and on the left side you have the letters EAGLESF. On the right you have 1, 2, or 3, and then you write the number in for each one. Ideally, after each match that you play, and then after the tournament or event, you do the average, and then you compare the averages to your last tournament, and you can see what areas you need to improve on and what areas you're doing well. And the 3 is the top of the scale, so it's not golf. If it was golf, it would be a 1 would be the top score, but with pickleball, it's a 3. So 3 would be there is no more room for improvement. That is absolutely, under the circumstances, the best I could have done with my effort.
Mm,
And 1 would be needs a lot of improvement, and 2 would be needs some improvement. And then you can gradate it, or make a gradient more precise: 2.5, 1.5, 2.89. As you play more and become more familiar with the scale, you learn more about yourself. And sometimes what I find with the athletes that are being honest to themselves with what the number is, that a 3 months ago was a 2.5 now. But I'm not here to judge, but I would say you have to have some scale to. It's not judging the effort; it's putting the fact next to the effort. And a good way to
mm,
to say it is, if all of the people that watched, some people that you know, some people that you don't know, were to write the 3, 2, 1 on your effort, what would they say? And
I
how
like that.
closely does that align with what you're saying? And now your coaches, your friends, you're going to know more about what is a lot of effort or not, because you know yourself
Mm.
better. But the others, it's a good indication of what it was. And I was coaching an athlete when we did the 3-2-1. I did the 3-2-1 with the parents separately from the athlete, and they were drastically different because a temper tantrum happened, and the athlete gave himself a 3 on attitude, and so we had to have a separate talk, because that's not what a 3 is. That's a 1. That's not. I think maybe he got the scale messed up.
I was actually gonna ask you, with doing that, do you find that, and this could be unique to every individual, do you find that the athlete is usually tougher on themselves than the parents are, or vice versa? Do you even friends or coaches, is it really vary athlete to athlete on if they're more tough on themselves than not?
Okay, so that's a deep one, but I'll give you a
Yeah,
brief. I'll give you a brief outline of that. The
yeah,
athlete I break down into two types of athletes.
okay.
The the self-motivated athlete, the number is typically um, more accurate. The athlete that needs push to be pushed by the parent is more of a pleaser, or doing it for their parents, or the parents are living through the athlete, their son or daughter, and
Mm,
those numbers are artificially higher, I've seen, because they more report what they think their coach or parent wants, not what it really is. And you have
mm.
to get to really where it is where the growth begins, because if you're not where you are, then you're never going to get where you need to be.
Yeah, you're almost lying to yourself a little bit,
You're almost lying to
right?
yourself. Yeah, I did a great job. Pat on the back. I did a great. Well, then you're not going to do. I actually had this conversation with an athlete. I said, okay, so for 2 tournaments now, you gave yourself all threes. Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful, great. I can't help you anymore. You got to help me help you. Give me what the lowest 3 was. Give me 2 of the lowest threes, because if
Yeah.
they're all threes, my work is done here. Like, congratulations, you know?
Exaggerated.
Let's pick up another sport. I don't know what, I don't
Yeah,
know. You know, I mean, believe me, I'm not trying to dissuade someone to get all threes, but that should happen maybe once a year. If I talked to Gigi Fernandez, 17-time Grand Slam double champion in tennis.
yeah.
She said, I asked her, like, when do you get into flow state? When do you play perfectly? I think she said, I can't remember the exact response, but it was twice in her career. Like, what?
Mm.
Twice in
Wow,
your career? Are you kidding
that's a
me? Now,
yeah.
that's an athlete that is really tough on herself. You're really tough. So I would probably say it happened maybe 10 times. She's at 2, but
Yeah.
so I that's something there. And so I would say that. And then the parents that are just, they want what's best for the athlete, the child, and lets the athlete live their life, is more accurate. I think if they want it because they wish they were a pro athlete, they're not. I don't know. It could be a little different. So that's tricky. I think the main thing is, as long as the parent is candid and honest with the response, that's where you're going to get the closest. But I think typically the athlete is usually, I think older athletes are tougher on themselves. Younger athletes, parents are tougher on them. But yeah, so as far as the 3-2-1, you write the 3-2-1 next to the E for effort. You come up with the term, then you slide down to attitude. But you want to know there's gradients. Like effort, the true measure of effort is when you're losing. Did you run down every ball? Not when you're winning. It's easy to run down balls when you're winning. It's tougher when you're losing. When
Yeah.
you're not feeling well, you're sore, cramping. Did you run down every ball or not? If you're having heat exhaustion, did you still give the effort? That. Then you go to the A for the attitude. you know, it was tough opponents. They had tough personalities. It was unfair, whatever. What's the attitude look like? it's harder to get a 3 in that circumstance. But positive attitude is your behavior during the match, during the game. What is your behavior like? How did you interact with your opponent and your partner and the referees? That's where attitude comes out. Did you argue line calls? uh, that's a piece of attitude. Some of it you have to stick up for yourself, but it's how you argue a call.
Mm.
Just like the tone is more important than the fact that you disagreed. Disagreeing is okay. It's how you disagree. And that's tough because sports bring out the best and worst in people. And you hope in those circumstances it's the best.
And so something that I wanted to emphasize on that when going through, so we just went through effort and attitude of Eagles, but something that you brought up that I want to make sure like that is emphasized is a 3 is really saying that there's nothing else you could have done, right? Like you basically did everything possible that you could have done in order to achieve a 3. And I think that was kind of a shift for me too when we first started, right? Was you asked me those questions and I was like, "Oh, like a 3, like I did everything that I thought I could." But I think where I needed to challenge and reflect of, am I capping my own potential then, realistically? Because I'm saying that I have no more room for growth by giving you a 3. So,
Yeah.
as we've gone through these sessions, I've been more honest with myself of like, I have a lot of room to grow in every category. So there's
Yeah.
no way that it should really be a 3 anytime soon unless my body was being dragged off the court and I literally could not move any longer, Like if I was reflecting on effort and I was out there literally needing to be dragged off the court, maybe I'd give myself a 3 in that moment, right?
Yeah.
But other than that, we've discussed it's like 2.85, right?
Yeah.
2.87. And then going back and saying, "Okay, what were the small moments that I could have improved on?" And I think that's really important to emphasize for any athlete because you're honestly limiting your own potential if you are not honest with yourself. Like you're like when people talk about like ceilings for athletes, like you're giving yourself a ceiling. Realistically, you're
Yeah.
saying this is as high as I can go. And then with that mentality, what's gonna make you want to put in more effort? You're gonna be too comfortable to put more effort. You're gonna sit on you're gonna be thinking that you're sitting on your high horse when you're not there yet.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's really an important emphasis there. But if we're continuing forward through Eagles, right? We're through
Right.
effort, we're through attitude. Now walk us through how to analyze really gratitude. Like what are we doing? Are we just saying, "Ah, we're thankful to be here," or really what's the thought process when we're looking to break down gratitude?
So gratitude, I think, is a tougher one because it's a more higher level concept, and it's something that should be done on and off the court every day. Being grateful that you're alive, it
Mm,
starts with that. Being grateful that you're waking up in a warm bed.
yeah.
You have a home. There's athletes that have lived in trailers just to support their careers. So, you know, uh, you have to you have to reflect on that. It's being humble and having humility. And the nice thing about gratitude, and it sounds tongue in cheek, but when you're grateful for something, you can't have the feeling of regret simultaneously. And when you live and compete without regret is one step toward playing freely. So freely and gratitude are hand in hand, in my opinion. A lot of the
Mm,
Eagles, they fall in different categories. And so what does that mean? Well, it could be as simple as think of one thing this morning when you wake up that you are grateful for. One thing. And you can even, you know, think about one mistake I made yesterday, then
mm.
one thing I did well, and then what I'm grateful for. But you want to end off on either what you did well or grateful for. You don't want to end up on the mistake that you made. So
Yeah.
but if you do that every morning, something like that, then that gets you in the right mindset for the day. But in your
100%.
journal, if you just write down, and it doesn't have to be written, but if you say that you love someone that morning, your kids, your spouse, your girlfriend, boy, whatever, just that act of expressing love is an expression of gratitude. And it could be verbal, it could be written, it could just be a thought. But if we get quote unquote greedy with where we are and what we don't have, then nothing
Mm,
is ever going to be enough. So that is why I say you got to be careful with goals and goal setting, because if you're always chasing your goal, then if you think about it, you're not really present. You're not
mm,
really free. You're you're
true.
you're you're tied to your goal. You're a prisoner to your goal. You don't want to be a prisoner to your goal. You want to be excited to try to reach your goal. And so that would be gratitude and giving yourself 3, 2, 1 on that. And that's a tough one to grade and do, but it's necessary.
So something that I kind of was thinking about as you're talking about that is, and I'm sure other people have this question because we literally just talked about not capping yourself on a ceiling, right? And knowing that you want to continuously grow as a person in every part of life, right? How how would you balance the because you just brought up wanting to actively be present to not always moving the goalpost, but really working towards something? Is it as simple as gratitude really just keeps you grounded and keeps you present while you're pursuing a goal, while you're pursuing growth in any category? Or else without gratitude, you're really just consistently moving the goalpost. You're consistently chasing the next thing. Is it really that's like a counterbalance system? You're really using gratitude as that balance, that grounding in life to keep you moving forward but being present while you're moving. Would
I
that be a
think
good summary?
gratitude is the median between displacency and your goals.
Mm,
If you're displacent, you're not going after anything. And
mm.
if you're really going after your goals, you're really, high charging, but you need to have that humility, that balance, that I appreciate where I am. Arthur Ashe, once said, I'm going to butcher the quote, but that basically be content with where you are, not where you want to be, or too happy with what just happened, and be right there. I'm going to do the best I can with what I have, and this is what you have today. Make the most of it, and that's why readiness is so important. Uh, our world records we've talked about in the past, and we have one upcoming July 21. It's the at a moment's notice, I am already ready. I'm pre-ready, and a lot of that is packing your mind and heart with being grateful for where you are. And so
I
that's
could
that
not
would
agree
be
more.
yeah, that would
Could
be
not agree
gratitude.
more. And to make that slightly relatable for, anybody that is listening, something that I had literally just did with you when we talked about it was regardless of going out there and getting my ass kicked sometimes, right? It's that I'm super grateful to have the opportunity to travel, to play pickleball, to pursue it on a professional level. Like, just being able to do that and allocate my time to really something that I love allows me to stay present every single time I'm there, right? Even in the moments where frustration does creep in, right? Like I was just talking about, I did get a little antsy in the last game, like not wanting to lose again and be down by a lot for a second game in a row. But what always grounds you is me reflecting and saying, how awesome is it that I get to do this? Right? How awesome is it that I just get to travel, play pickleball, meet new people, develop new connections through pickleball? Like that is something that you can sit there and be like, this is just amazing. amazing. And a practice that I usually do that in, if it is that day and I see frustration creeping in, or I see that I'm getting a little bit anxious or not present, right, as a summary, I'll do it in that moment. But for what I do consistently, and I've noticed that it just helps with me going to bed, is I'll do it right before bed. Like when I'm laying in my bed, I'm done reading, I'm a little bit tired, I'll do a quick couple minutes of being like, what was I grateful for today? And that allows me to go to sleep in such a state of serenity and has actually helped with my sleep tremendously. And even getting up in the morning has helped with that. So that's at least something that I utilize that has helped me tremendously that somebody can take and use themselves. Now
Yeah.
moving on from gratitude,
Yeah.
next on the list is learning. And I think that's something that I've been actually working, that's probably been a priority of mine recently, is learning within a match specifically. Like, what are you doing? Do you want to break that down for us on how to go about learning within a match? Because I struggled with that initially to identify it.
Yeah, it's on the job training. It's not after the job training because then it's too
Yeah.
late. So it's not like career learning. Oh, what was my learning? Oh, wonderful. It's right now I'm still in this, but I might not
Mm,
win it. What am I going to do? So the best way to analyze that, if you're playing a sport where it's only you, like singles pickleball, whatever, singles tennis, is how did the point end? And if we're going to say that unforced errors exist, let's say it's easier for that. Well, that's a conversation for another time. But then there's 6 ways. Your opponent hits a clean winner. Your opponent is forced into an error.
mm,
Your opponent makes an unforced error. You hit a clean winner. You're forced into an error, and you make an unforced error. If you look at those 6 things, learning is which one of those happen the most frequently. There's 6, right? So then you break them down by percentages each match, and then you
okay.
look at it and you say, I hit no winners. I was not aggressive enough.
Hmm.
I hit let's see. I hit too many complete random errors. You know, maybe I took too much risk on the wrong balls, things like that. Most stats show that most points end with forcing errors. And in pickleball, a forced error is not a mistake. A forced error is you get them to pop it up, then you put it away. That could be the forced error that won the point, not the actual put away, the winner. So that's one way to break it down. But you need to do that kind of thinking during the match. What is
Okay.
going on? And usually the funny question you can ask your partner, ask my brother, what just happened? What just happened here? You know, that usually say that after the end of the first game if you lost it big. What just happened? That's another way of saying, okay, how did the point end? Here's how it ended. Good. What do we do to not make it end like that? In other words, it doesn't matter if we lose. That is
Mm.
irrelevant. We cannot lose the same way we just lost. Let's find a unique way to lose. It's more fun.
And I think so, to that point, on top of that, which is even going to be the next step for Jared and I when we've talked about communicating on the court and wanting to take that to the next level, it is using us both knowing that that is our framework after a point, being like, hey, it's one of these 6 things. Like, what just happened? Which one was it? And that would put you both on the same page of, okay, here's what we need to do next,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think even me reflecting, right, something that you talked about was I definitely had a few, um, I would say, quote unquote, we talk about no unforced errors, but points where I took too much risk for sure. Took too
Yeah.
much risk on a shot that, like, we defined as well, and we could define this another time too, but was aggressive with high risk,
Yep.
right? And that's really the shot that you don't want to take. So to that point, if I was reflecting with Jared and we were like, hey, what happened? And we were just like, that was a high risk shot that was highly aggressive. Let's not do that. That would probably be a great reflection. Then it's like, okay, paddle eraser, move on. I've identified it, get to the next point. So moving from learn, I think that's a great framework.
Yep.
And that's something that, being transparent, I haven't even implemented yet, right? So I think
Yep.
that's definitely the next level for me to even move on and
Yep.
really truly see what comes of it, and to work with Jared and I. So the next that we want to talk about is enjoyment, right? That's the next E on the list. At first, I've struggled with a lot of these things, right? I keep saying I struggled, but I really did, to identify like how they were and how they utilized it. And I would say that I've done a complete 360 on
Yep.
enjoyment on the court, right?
Yeah.
And I'll have you start breaking that down on how to go about enjoyment, and then I'll chime in on how I really came full circle.
Yeah, so it's just knowing the difference between joy and happiness. And
Mm,
happiness is based on external outcomes that are not within your control, and they bias your state of being. Whereas your state of being comes from the inside out, and that's joy, being joyful that you're able to play pickleball, that you're able to play the sport that you're playing. And they're two drastically different things. Uh, uh, my friend and an Olympic gold medalist diver, Laura Wilkinson. I did a lot of work with her. She's wonderful, and it's knowing that difference, and she talks a lot about that. But it's really knowing that difference, that I am present, and I could grade my joy based on internally what I'm feeling, not what happened. If
mm,
you base it just on what happened, then it's happiness. And that's why it's happened in happiness, And but if it doesn't happen, you're not gonna be happy. And do you want to live and die with your
yeah,
mood and being present, or not, with an outcome that you're not in control of?
exactly. Exactly. And I think what supports that for me is also the element of gratitude that we talked about. And I think finding joy is really being present in doing something that you love, right? So a tactic that I've used, and I think just started doing it and then realized this is exactly what I'm doing, is at first coming from like a highly physical sport. So I was a big hockey guy growing up. It's very A lot of it's adrenaline driven. A lot of it is like go, go, go. It's harnessing that adrenaline, it's harnessing that anger, and going out there and sometimes blasting somebody, right? And really setting a tone. I've changed a different perspective in pickleball that I found just provides me so much enjoyment, and it's interacting with the ref, it's interacting with the other player, it's interacting with the crowd. And that's not everybody's strategy, but if you go and watch someone like Jack Sock, who is a huge example of it, the reason he has just loved transitioning to pickleball so much is because, if you want to call him an entertainer, sure, but those interactions are keeping him present point after point after point after point. So the emphasis is like whatever keeps you present is the key to finding enjoyment, and understanding that you are there because you love doing that. If you don't love doing it, you need to start allocating your time to other things, right? Um, so that's really for me where I did a complete 360, was that I went from having a lot of expectation and really creating this gap, which we call frustration, between performance and expectation on the court,
Yep.
to then saying, this is what I want to allocate my time towards every single day because I love it, right? It pushes me, it pushes my athletic ability, and I wouldn't be allocating my time to it if I didn't love it. To then the next level being, while I'm there, I want to be present and enjoy every moment, because that's what sets the tone for me to continue day after day. and continuously have enjoyment in something that I love. So there's many different tactics that people can have going in, but the ultimate, I would say, conclusion is to find a way to consistently be present. At least for me, right? And being present may be tuning everybody else out. Like that may be what works for you. Unfortunately for me, tuning everybody else out forces me to overthink a lot of things. So by me being present and interacting with my environment, it allows me to stay in the moment and not drift mentally to even the past or the future and really build anxiety. Would you also agree with that, that like presence is the key thing in finding joy when you are out there, whether it is in pickleball or anything else?
Yes, being present. Yes, and that looks different for
Yeah.
different people. Some people need the blinders on.
Yeah.
Others, like you said, need to interact with their environment. I would just say keep the interaction to the environment between points, not during them.
Yes. So, well, this is a perfect transition because the last letter in Eagles, right, is S, and then we'll move on to Freely, which is a little
Yeah,
bit different. But
yeah,
S being sportsmanship, right? So you do teeter a line for sure
yeah,
when you are consistently interacting with your environment, if it is the opponent, if it is the ref. And in that case, something that we talked about is being prepared for getting a response that you
yeah.
weren't predicting or that doesn't work for you. So talk to me about really navigating sportsmanship on the court.
So pickleball, tennis, ultimate frisbee are three sports where the athletes are also the umpires. I give a
Mm,
lot of credit for athletes who also have to make calls that are not necessarily in their own best interest. That takes a lot of character. With that said, sportsmanship is not just line calls. If you're not 100% sure it's out, don't call it out. It's in. Not when in doubt, call it out. I know that was a funny thing in a lot of college sports they say, but it's when in doubt, call it in. You always give the benefit of the doubt to your opponents. Then you go forward from that. Well, what else is sportsmanship? Well, it's there's gamesmanship. There's trying to purposely distract the opponent. In pickleball, they call people on this sneaker squeaking at the kitchen line, and gave the point to the other opponents. Things like that. Grunting, extended grunts, grunting when your opponent is about to hit the ball, things like that. So those are things. So I would say what matters more to me as a coach and even as a player myself, did my player or me myself as an athlete, did I do it with the intent to distract, or was there
mm.
some other purpose that bettered me irrelevant of my opponent? And that's really the question you got to ask yourself or your athlete, and then the answer then will determine whether you get a 3, 2, or 1 on sportsmanship.
So the question that I will follow up with, because I'm sure everybody is wondering it too. Uh, and it's something that I've done and definitely teeters the line. It is in those moments, right, when you are behind and you can see that your opponent is in a high level of flow state. What may be some things that may align with sportsmanship that may give you an edge to actually get back into the match, right? And I know that you can't fully control your opponent, but is there things that you can do to throw them off or get a little momentum back your way? Because I know we talk about weathering the storm, but sometimes you can only weather the storm too so long before it's too late, right? So what are some things that we
Yeah,
can do that you can do that may help you in those moments?
a real timeout or an imaginary
Okay.
one. So the
Okay.
real one is you take a timeout. There's no gamesmanship there. You
Mm,
know, uh, if you're allowed timeouts, depending on what sport you're playing. Communication, if you're playing doubles or with a team, communicate. Take a moment. Take the maximum number of seconds between points to communicate. And the third, the internal one is, which is the internal timeout, is a mindset shift. you know, Turn your hat
mm,
backward. I like to compete with my hat backward because I'm not coaching. Coaching is pointing forward. It's all about the player in front of me.
Yep.
It's about me when it's back, be internal. So
Okay.
that's
I like
another one,
that.
the time. So time, communication, and timeouts, those are what I would say. But also, you got to remember this, and this is where athletes kind of get it wrong, is you got to look at it. I like to look at things from black or white facts. Try to make sense of statistics. You and I were both engineers. I was on honors engineering, mechanical engineering at UConn. I chose sports marketing, and sports science. But you can appreciate that the numbers don't lie. So if
Yeah.
you look at it, if a team or player won 10 points in a row, they're mathematically less likely to win number 11. Contrary what you might feel with momentum or lack of momentum. And so, for example, if both teams are of the same skill level and one team won 10 points in a row, who should win the next 10?
It's like flipping a coin, right? I would say
It's
the
like
other team
flipping
to
a
win the
coin.
next 10.
The other team. That's where athletes fall down. That is the perception versus the reality. So what I do when I'm down is, okay, time is up. Your run is done. Now it's my turn. And if you could just think that, I'm telling you right now, you can then put yourself in it and be it, and then it will happen. It will manifest. But the problem is, believe it or not, even high-level athletes think exactly the opposite.
I will be honest that I think that way, right? We
Yeah.
just talked about it.
You just,
So
and I don't blame you. But here's
yeah.
the thing: if you look now, the exception is if you're playing world number one. Okay, it's slightly less, but not, because for them to win 11 points in a row is more difficult than 10. Is more difficult than 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So still, you have more of a chance. More of a chance. Because if I were to say to you, you're playing the world number one, can you win 1 point out of 11? You say, yeah. Can you win 1 out of 1 every time? You say, probably not. Right?
Yeah.
So you see, so you got to
I do.
get in there with the logic of it, the mathematics of it, not the emotion of it, because the emotion is going to be dejection, frustration. What is going on? They're on a run. They have a lot of momentum. And, momentum is more intangible in sports, not tangible. And, momentum by definition, if I were to hold a round boulder on the edge of a cliff and I'm about to let it drop, right? That rock has momentum. That is a real fact. But if someone is up 10-0, it's perceived momentum. It is not real. It is not there. There's nothing there. There is not a there. The only thing would be if they were standing up here and they can serve down on you in pickleball, then momentum is real because they have momentum. The ball has momentum. It's coming down at you. Everything is the same. Nothing has changed. The momentum is the same. That's a conversation for another day. But do I think momentum exists? I think it has to be dealt with because you think it exists.
And would you say that's more of, as an athlete, you can feel yourself when you have quote unquote momentum, right? You could feel when you're getting in that flow state. So is it us almost saying like we can see that our opponent is getting in that flow state? So therefore the momentum is on their side. Would that be a good breakdown of that?
Yeah, except I think sports announcers have gone so far into using and overusing the word momentum that it's almost hard to unstack it or unwind it. But if I were to unwind it and start anew, I would just measure it on flow state duration.
I completely agree. And I think it's like, for me, like relating to it, and being in flow state at points in a match, or if it is just rec games, whatever, you could kind of tell when another athlete is starting to do that. Right. And I think
Yeah.
that's where, because you can relate so heavily to that moment. And you're like, okay, the momentum is on their side, or okay, I'm now feeling the flow. I'm now getting locked in. The momentum is shifting my way because I'm in flow state and I could tell that they're falling out of it.
Yeah.
Um, at least from a relatable athlete standpoint. But that does move perfectly into what is freely, right? Because when we align flow state, it is you are playing freely. You're not really thinking about much. You're just really doing. And I think where I've consistently and still am navigating this heavily is like how to get there. And I think everybody asks that question, but that's not necessarily the right question to ask. And I think that's something that you've given me perspective on, is it's not like you just get to freely. Like you just don't get there immediately. Same thing, and I guess you can connect that with flow state. Um, but would you, my question moving to freely would be, do you make flow state and freely interchangeable, or are they really two different things?
They're very similar. And
Okay.
freely is more the state of being, not the outcome. So,
Okay.
for example, um, freely would be not having an opinion or judgment of what is happening. You play from the heart with clear mind, clear heart, kind eyes type of
Yeah.
thing. That is freely. And you know, flow state is more a state then of being, and maybe I'm mixing both a little bit, but flow state is playing freely and flawlessly at the same
Mm,
time.
I
Whereas
completely agree with
whereas freely is you hit the ball freely and it might have been out. As my Italian grandmother once said, me no care, no matter, no matter. Still hit the ball, hit the ball, right? And it's almost like when Michael Jordan says the basketball seems like a watermelon, you
you.
know,
Yes.
that you just can't miss, you know. That's almost a combination of you play freely long enough, the likelihood that flow state will arrive increases.
Completely agree. And I think that the reason that I asked you that question is because I initially aligned flow state with freely. And that's where I definitely went wrong, because I'm like, why can't I get into flow state? And like you just talked about with your tennis reference, right? Who was it again? Said
You
she
Gigi
2 times?
Fernandez. Yeah,
Yeah,
Gigi
2
Fernandez.
times
Yeah.
she said she's been in flow state in her entire career,
Yeah,
right?
something like that. In a
Something
career,
like that.
in a year, something like that.
Yeah.
I think it might have been in a year.
Either way, to emphasize that point is like me learning that they're two different things is really what allowed me to play more freely, consistently on the pickleball court, and even do that in other elements of life. And what I'm getting at is it's doing things, it's taking a shot without associating yourself with a specific outcome. So, for example, and this is something that you gave me directly, it was like take the shot regardless of it going in or not, right? See it, take the shot, and if it goes out, it goes out, right? But it's really accepting the fact that you don't care what the outcome is. You're taking the right shot at the right time. And then where you're saying the next level, and this is where I started to realize that, is doing that over and over and over again to allow flow state to then occur. And sometimes the games in pickleball itself are too short. And it's really challenging to get into flow state really, really fast, and even get there really, really fast and hit all your shots really, really quickly, just because the games are so short. And that takes a whole skill in itself. But for me, what I wanted to define and emphasize that you given me that was so big is that really freely is a building block for flow state. It's freely is taking all your shots regardless of if they go in or not. not hesitating, really seeing it, taking the shot because you know it's the right shot to take, and then allowing flow state to really develop from there. And I think that's super key, or else you're going to sit out there, you're going to be frustrated, and you're going to say, why the hell can't I get to flow state? Why can't I be out there, take every shot, and hit every single shot, right? Not only play freely, but also play flawlessly. I think that was a tremendous breakdown. Absolutely tremendous breakdown.
Thank you.
So to give a total review, it's really you're walking through Eagles, which is effort, attitude, gratitude, learning, enjoyment, sportsmanship, and then freely. And you're really giving yourself a rating using the 3-2-1 system, one
Yep.
being the lowest, 3 being the highest, and
Yep.
understanding that a 3 means you can't do any more, right?
Yeah.
And using a scale, let's say it is 2.85, let's say it's 2.45, like being really specific in those ratings. So when you're logging that, let's say it is in an Excel spreadsheet, let's say it is in a PDF, and it's written, whatever you're doing with it to log it, you have now
Yeah.
data. As we talked about, the data doesn't lie, that now you're seeing progress in each of those categories. And to emphasize is that the reason that you established this and have really employed me to use it, and it's been just absolutely, I'll say, life-changing for me on the pickleball court, is that it allows me to understand that that's what's in my control, right? Those are my controllables every single time that I step on the court. And even other elements of life, right? I've used the same Eagles F when walking into it.
Yeah.
Seriously. Like
Yeah.
I've had a bunch of calls with the really the Fail First project when we talk about sponsorships, etc. I've had a few
Yeah.
of those calls and have walked through like, okay, did I do all these things? And if I
Yeah.
can reflect and do those again, it's like, okay, like I did the best that I could because I controlled what I can control.
Yeah.
So
Focus on your controllables.
exactly. So I'm super glad that we walked through that. I wanted, because we briefed on really what Eagles F was, everybody needed to know what the details were behind it because it's just so impactful. It's a great practice to have on a daily basis because you can use it in so many different elements. And it really overemphasizes the fact of like you control what you can, and that really keeps you present and allows you to find so much more joy that way.
Absolutely.
Right? Because you're not getting lost in so many other elements of life that are outside of your control. I think that's where a lot of people get frustrated and anxious, etc. Is like trying to control so many things that you just physically can't.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you want to close with, or you want me to ask you one specific question, and then that will be it?
Let's go to the question.
The little secret question.
Secret question.
Okay. So we talked about Eagles, right? And everybody's probably thinking, how the hell did this guy sit down and think of such a great structure to review life? Like, what was the origin story of Eagles? How did it come to be?
Do you have another hour?
All
right. So here's
give me the brief version. Give me the short version.
Here's the Cliff Note version.
Yeah.
So I've had mental skills coaches. I always feel like the best coaches have coaches. So I always have a mentor and a coach, someone I aspire to be more like, or now I have a person and coach that I want to aspire to be more like. And so I was always then coaching the controllables over and over and over. And I bought my first real camera, my Nikon camera, about 3 years ago. And there's an eagle's nest in my hometown. And the only way to get good photos is to have a real camera with a zoom, not iPhone. And so it struck me because I was developing, photos, basically now cleaning them up and making postcards out of them and things like that. And then I said, wait a second. I said, I always say effort and attitude and gratitude and learning and enjoying and sportsmanship. I'm always saying those things. And that spells eagles. Like, whoa! I just kind of reordered it, of course.
Yeah.
And there's of course others. There's many other controllables, but those were the ones that I was coaching and using myself that had the most benefit to me and the players I coached. And I said, there you go, boom, trademark that. Is eagles. And then my daughter astutely, and I mentioned in the beginning, said, but Dad, you didn't include freely. And I tried to force it into one of the eagles and it just didn't work. And then
Yeah.
when I realized that there's really a double F, that focus and freely should happen all the time. That's foundational. You start with focus, you end with playing freely, and eagles are right in between.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Yeah, because even for me, like when you come up with such an intelligent framework that works so well, it's like, how the hell did this guy think of this? Like what the hell happened? Um, but it but either way, I'll let you go today. Just absolutely amazing stuff. Absolutely amazing stuff. So thank you, Angelo. I'll let you
Thank
go.
you. Appreciate it.
I'll see you.